I'm Mark Riepe. I head up the Schwab Center for Financial Research, and this is Financial Decoder, an original podcast from Charles Schwab. It's a show about financial decision-making and the cognitive and emotional biases that can cloud our judgment. As I record this episode, it's the holiday season, and that means there's a lot going on. For example, shopping, holiday parties, and debating whether or not Die Hard is a holiday movie. For a lot of people, it also means that charitable giving is top of mind. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. My guest is Julie Sunwoo. She's the president of DAF Giving 360 here at Schwab. DAF stands for Donor Advised Fund, and Julie's responsible for supporting DAF Giving 360's core mission to increase charitable giving in the United States. Julie's been at Schwab for more than 30 years. She's held a variety of leadership positions, including in corporate vendor management, corporate risk management, investor services, and advisor services. Julie Sunwoo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before we get into the bulk of the interview, a lot of time with first-time guests, we like to kind of kick things off by getting a little bit of their background. So tell me a little bit about what got you interested in the field of charitable giving in the first place.
Yes. And for those that aren't aware, I recently joined the organization DAF Giving 360 as president in April of this year. So I've been with this organization for a little over 6 months now. And it is in the philanthropic sector. I'm thrilled to be a part of it after working in other parts of Schwab for quite a while. To your question, I have had community service as a part of my life since I was a teenager. I started as a candy striper. I started tutoring in high school and college and early adulthood, and most recently have been involved in a number of causes related to food insecurity and hunger. And so being able to play a role in helping others find their passion in service through working with this donor advised fund is just, like I said, a huge thrill for me.
And we're going to be spending most of our time here talking about donor advised funds. So maybe a good way to start out is just give a quick overview of the donor advised fund concept. What is one? How do they differ from other options that, for example, private foundations?
Yeah. I'll start with donor advised funds. So donor advised funds are, I believe, a really simple, tax smart way to give to charity. How they work is that you make a contribution of either cash or appreciated assets. We take many forms of appreciated assets, everything ranging from real estate to interests in private companies to even cryptocurrency. I know that's a big topic of conversation lately. And essentially help people liquidate those assets. People receive a tax deduction for the value of those assets at the time of contribution. They can then either grant that money out right to charity immediately, or they can invest it in a number of vehicles, either by themselves or have it managed by a registered investment advisor. Let that grow over time until they're ready to donate to the charity of their choice. And we enable grants out to charities that are deemed eligible by the IRS. So really any 501c3 organization that is eligible by the IRS is an organization that we can help make a grant out to. And that's a very large number of nonprofits that can benefit from these grants.
Julie, we spend a lot of time on the show talking about the importance of planning, particularly financial planning, not surprisingly. And I was wondering if you could give us a high-level understanding of how donors can use, for example, a donor advised fund as part of let's say, a broader financial strategy, such as estate planning or retirement planning.
The first thing that you have to think about is what is important to the family, to the individual. And so when you're thinking about issues like estate planning, the question of legacy comes up often. What sort of mark do you want to leave? People that eventually have the means, right, to carve out a portion and give to philanthropic causes have a great way to figure out, what is important to them. What do they want to live on? What do they want their kids to participate in as they think about where that money is destined to be? So for people that decide that philanthropic giving is a core part of their estate plan, their retirement plan, planning ahead to figure out where they want that money to go and what vehicles they want to use to enable that giving is an important part of that plan. And I think donor advised funds, given the benefits that we just spoke about earlier, can play a really, really critical, important role in making it easy for them to make that happen.
Yeah, so let's drill down a little bit there. What are some of the? I mean, that's a great set of questions for figuring out the overall aim of the charitable giving. So that's excellent. What are some initial questions an investor can ask themselves to narrow down a particular type of account or strategy that's going to best work for them, given their aims from a charitable standpoint?
I mean, I think a couple of things. So, first is what type of assets are you inclined to give? I mean, I think in my book, like all giving is good. So, if you have a philanthropic cause you want to support, there are many ways to give. You mentioned foundations earlier. Most people actually give cash gifts, right? So that they can immediately get money to the nonprofits of their choice. If you are thinking longer term and have, like I said, non cash assets, so all of those types of appreciated securities, especially that you're looking for a place to give and to leverage, you can make use of a vehicle like donor advised funds to do that. In fact, over 60% of the contributions that we typically receive in a given year are appreciated assets. And so, if appreciated assets are something that you want to take advantage of, you can contribute them to a donor advised funds, receive that immediate tax deduction for the full value without getting a tax hit for that contribution because you're giving to a 501c3, a nonprofit, which is what donor advised funds are. And so that full value of that investment can eventually be given to a nonprofit. So that maximizes your charitable contribution. So that's a great vehicle for people to think about.
Before you gave us a nice definition of what a donor advised fund is. Can you tell us what it isn't, and are there any kind of misconceptions, if you will, that you come across when people start thinking about these types of funds?
Absolutely. I think one of the misconceptions is that it's a vehicle purely for really wealthy people. So in philanthropic giving in general, sometimes people believe that that's for people with more means. I think one of the things that DAFs brings is low minimums or no minimums. In the case of DAF Giving 360, we have no account minimums. So you could presumably start an account for yourself or for your children with as little as $100, very low amounts. And we do see that activity. So I think that's one misconception. I think one of the things that the DAF that we run and the other donor advised funds across the country want to do is to just increase charitable giving, period. And so accessibility and having things like low or no account minimums is really important to all of us. I think the other thing is, does putting money into a donor advised fund, another misconception is, does that reduce charitable giving in some way? Because it's an easy place for people to donate assets and sort of maybe don't think about them. But in fact, we actually see the opposite. We recently ran a survey earlier this fall, and more than 70% of people that we poll that use donor advised funds today say they actually give more. And I think that's because once you contribute assets to a fund, two things happen. One is you typically invest them in vehicles like mutual funds, ETFs, working with a registered investment advisor, and that money grows over time. In fact, this last year, our donors saw an increase because markets were so strong of $4 billion in extra value to their contributions. And that's money that's destined to go to nonprofits eventually. So imagine that impact. So that's the other misconception I'd call out.
Julie, earlier you described a little bit about how, at least with the Schwab Donor Advised Fund, I think the number was 70% of the donations were in the form of appreciated stock. Tell me a little bit about doing that versus, just writing a check to a charity, right? Making a cash contribution as opposed to donating an asset, stocks, real estate, or you mentioned cryptocurrency.
Yes. Like I said earlier, I think people have many choices in the ways they want to give to nonprofits. And if writing a check speaks to the person and that's the way they want to give in that moment in time, I think that's wonderful. But if you're thinking about issues like tax planning, financial planning, which I know is the purpose of a lot of the topics that you discuss on this call, Mark, I think that the idea of donating appreciated securities to a donor advised fund makes just great financial sense. We in donor advised fund land will take pretty much any security that can be liquidated. So that's a vast gamut of things. It even includes things like, in addition to the things that you mentioned, collectibles like pieces of art, yachts. We have many stories about things that people have contributed to our fund to try to liquidate. And so as long as it's able to be liquidated, we handle that burden and make sure that we do that for you. So that provides a lot of ease to people who maybe don't want to do it themselves. So that combined with The tax benefit, I think, is a great way to take what is maybe potentially difficult to think about selling, giving it to us so that we can liquidate it and make sure that you can maximize, like I said, that charitable impact eventually.
Julie, tax law weighs heavily into how giving is facilitated through someone's financial plan. For example, we had a big tax bill that passed this year. So as you think about the future, what should investors keep an eye on that might affect their strategy?
There are often changes to tax impacts and tax regulations affecting charitable contributions. And we did see some changes earlier this summer with the new tax bill. So there are three things that people should keep in mind as they go forward. So first, there is for people that do not itemize tax deductions, they're eligible for a new charitable deduction. So $1,000 for individuals and $2,000 for married couples filing jointly. And so for people that want to give cash to a nonprofit of their choice, that's an excellent vehicle, and people should take advantage of that. There are many organizations in need. The second thing is that there is a new floor for people in order to take a charitable deduction. So total donations must exceed 0.5% of adjusted gross income in order to be able to take advantage of that. There's also a ceiling. So people in the highest federal tax bracket of 37%, your tax benefits would now be limited to a maximum of 35 cents on the dollar. And so those are things that people should consider as they think about the amounts they want to donate in a given year. There are people, for example, that are trying to push up some of their donations into this year in order to take advantage of the tax preferential treatment of some of those higher earning tax brackets that you will not see next year. So definitely considerations to make sure that you're maximizing your tax benefits while still getting money out to charities that you want to see get the money.
Earlier, we were talking a little bit about the different goals that people have for their charitable intentions, and I wondered if you could spend a little bit of time talking about impact investing. It's been growing in popularity, and with donor-advised funds, how are donors really given the choice in how they want their money invested?
We are seeing that. So much more interest, growing interest in impact investing. And I think that's natural because people want to see what their money is doing. So they want to see the value of their philanthropic strategy. They want to see that it is working towards a specific goal that they have in mind. They want to make sure that the nonprofits that they're giving the money to are held a bit accountable to meeting the goals that they say they are trying to reach. And so we are seeing this interest not only on the higher end in ultra high net worth households, but also on the younger generation. So people that are maybe starting out in their philanthropic journey and trying to figure out, what causes, ignite the passion in them and making sure that they're making the most impact that they can. And impact investing is a great way to make that happen. So there are multiple ways for people to activate on impact investing. Here at DAF Giving 360, I'll give you examples of what those look like here. So we have in our lineup 3 actively managed, socially responsible investment pools for people that want a simpler way to make sure that they're having an impact through their investments. And then on the higher end, people can engage with a registered investment advisor of their choice if they want to work on a specific investment strategy that accomplishes a very specific impact investing goal. Those are just 2 great ways to make sure that they can incorporate impact investing into their plan.
I'll get back to my conversation with Julie in a moment. But the idea that giving to others will make us feel good, that's common. People who perform acts of kindness usually report that it improved their mood, and while that may be intuitive, it just so happens that it's been studied by a variety of researchers over the years. In one review of studies around acts of giving, researchers found that pro-social spending, that is spending money on other people, can increase happiness. In all the cases this study reviewed, the good feeling that came from giving to charity made it more likely that a person would give to charity again. As one researcher said, research suggests this creates a positive cascade. Another experiment called Spending Money on Others Promotes Happiness told one group of participants to spend money on themselves and another group to spend money on others. After they were asked to rate their level of happiness, the group that spent money on others experienced greater happiness than the first group. Those studies are interesting, but what's even more interesting is that there have been studies that look at the physical benefits of acts of altruism. For example, one study found that volunteering lowered blood pressure. Another experiment gave participants each $10, and they were told that they could keep it or give away as much of it as they wanted. Then the participants' level of cortisol were measured. The researchers found that the less money people gave away, the more shame they felt and the higher their cortisol levels, which is a chemical that the body produces to help regulate stress. Our Choiceology podcast did an episode on the link between happiness and generosity, and seeing how it starts out with a scene from the Charles Dickens classic A Christmas Carol, it could be a perfect listen for this season. And we'll link to it in the show notes. The bottom line is this: I'm a bit skeptical whenever I hear the phrase that something is a win-win. It always seems a little too good to be true, but not this time. Giving to charity can have a number of positive benefits for both the giver and the receiver. So let's find out more about giving and your finances from Julie. DAF Giving 360 is one of the largest national providers of donor-advised funds. So, Julie, I bet you have a lot of great data and insights into philanthropic trends through time. And as you look at that data, did you see any kind of recent trends or numbers that tell you about present-day giving behavior among investors?
Well, I think the first trend that we see is that philanthropic giving year over year is growing. And so, especially over the recent years, we've had, I think now, 3 years of a bull market where people are seeing their stock portfolios increase in value. And I think when people are feeling more confident in their investment portfolios, in their financial situation, and there are people that are feeling that way based on how, like I said, the markets have been doing, they tend to be more generous. And so I think that's maybe the number one rule in philanthropic giving is when people feel financially secure themselves, they tend to give more out, which is probably not a surprise to anyone. I think the other thing we get to see, because we are a large philanthropic organization, a large nonprofit in this country, is how donors are behaving. And so there are a few things I'd call out here. The first is that while Q4, for example, is a very busy season for us, we're in December right now and we're seeing incredible volumes of grant making. Donors do give year round, and that's a great thing for nonprofits and for us as well. So 40% of grants that we see are set as recurring gifts, which is incredibly important to nonprofits to help them run their organizations. And so we love to see that number, that people want to make sure that they continue to support the charities of their choice on an ongoing basis. I think the second thing is that people donate to local causes. I mean, that's probably not a surprise either. It's very personal, the causes that people support. And we see that in donations. 78% of donations are directed to donors' home states, so very local. And the other thing that we see is that when something happens in that local community, we've had some terrible disasters, natural disasters that have happened in this country where people needed help right on the spot. People tend to respond. This last year, for example, our donors donated $148 million to charities, and often within days of the natural disaster happening, which is also wonderful to see that response. And I think the last thing I call out is that people leverage advice givers. So whether it's advice givers through a financial institution like Schwab or an independent registered investment advisor, right now we work with over 4,700 financial advisors, and that number has increased. It's a 20% increase year over year. And so that number is growing as people seek out help, and probably also, to our earlier discussion, incorporate philanthropic giving into their overall financial plan.
We've talked about goals, about, having a plan and figuring out the goals you want with respect to charitable giving. We've talked about the different ways of making those donations, but I want to talk a little bit about the strategy for finding the right choices. Any insights you have on how to research and select specific charities?
Researching charities can be quite overwhelming because right now there are over 1.5 million charities in the U.S. Deemed eligible by the IRS. So that is a daunting number. So I can understand people's challenges when they think about, where do I go? I think the first thing to think about is to go back to your personal values. And not only your own, but if you're thinking about establishing a legacy that lives on beyond you, it's a great conversation starter, this values discussion to have with kids, grandkids, other members of the family, to bring everyone into the conversation. And that can really help hone the types of charities, at least the sector that you want to make an impact in. The second thing I do is to make sure that you leverage all the resources available out there. So I can mention some of the ones that we have in DAF Giving 360, but there are a number of philanthropic organizations that really do this specifically, help people pick the charities that they want to make sure they get money out to. At DAF Giving 360, for example, we have an Explore Charities landing page on our website, dafgiving360.org. Knowing that this is a challenge for people to pick the right charities that they want grants to go out to, we created that landing page and that tool to specifically help in this area. The other thing we have is a giving guide, the DAF Giving 360 Giving Guide, which also lays out some specific exercises so that people can reflect on those questions, like the values that are important, the types of charities they want to support to help them narrow it down.
Any other educational resources, kind of going beyond researching specific charities, educational resources that you have that will help donors understand the complexity of charitable giving in the context of their, let's say, their overall financial plan?
Yes, I would encourage people to look at our website, dafgiving360.org. We have things like a giving guide. I mentioned that earlier. Not only does it have exercises around how to pick charities, but it talks about the overall process, other considerations you should think about as you think about incorporating charitable giving into your financial plan. The other thing that we have is workbooks that we have created with partners like the National Center of Family Philanthropy to help incorporate discussions with friends or family members that you want to discuss the issue of philanthropic giving with. So there are many things that are available to you, not only through us, but other organizations as well. We also offer a number of educational webcasts, webinars that could be useful too. So keep an eye on the calendar for that.
Julie, you mentioned that a lot of the donations that people make, they happen in Q4. That's in fact, that's why we're doing this this particular episode in December, so no surprise there. Can you tell us a little bit about any specific IRS charitable contribution deadlines that people should be aware of before we hit year end?
It is an incredibly busy time for our team and anyone else probably involved with nonprofit and grant making. So the IRS charitable contribution deadline is December 31st, 2025 for this year. And that is the deadline if you want to receive a tax deduction for the contributions that you make to nonprofits. So for donors, specifically what that means in the case of donor advised funds is that all contributions are required to be submitted and processed by December 31st in order to get that tax deduction. We, of course, try to accommodate people up to the very last minute, but it's in everyone's best interest to try to get it not in on December 31st, hopefully earlier to allow for that processing time.
Couple more questions and I'll let you go. What do you see as the future of charitable giving? How might technology and new financial tools shape the landscape going forward?
Yes, there's so much activity all around in the technology development space, and we are no exception. So there's a lot of fintech activity in not only donor advised fund in this space, but also in the philanthropic space overall. So I think there are a couple of things that we should be thinking about. One is the experience that people have, making it easier, more streamlined, probably utilizing devices like mobile phones more to make it easier overall to give to charities. And so we're already seeing people innovating and developing technology in that space. I know artificial intelligence, AI, is on everyone's minds, another big topic of discussion. We are seeing that in our space as well. I think to the discussion earlier about potentially overwhelming issues like picking out of 1.5 million charities, that is one use of the new artificial intelligence tools that we're seeing is helping people parse through large amounts of data like that to try to narrow down the choice and make the best one for us.
Okay, last question, Julie. As you mentioned, you started in your role in April, so you've been there about 6-7 months. In that time, what have you learned about sort of the practice of giving and its potential to affect society?
Yes. I mean, what a privilege it is to be a part of making a positive impact to society. And I think that's what anyone in the philanthropic sector really strives to do. One of my immediate observations when I started back in April was getting to know the team, of course, and the broader philanthropic community. So the other heads of the donor advised funds, people who had foundations. It's a very collaborative community, as you can imagine, because we share a common goal. We just want to make sure that we increase charitable giving. So the immediate thing that I noticed was that the mission that we have around increasing that charitable giving is felt to the core, I think, by everyone involved in this organization and everyone in the sector. So whether you are processing grants or responding to donor phone calls or hosting webinars, marketing, whatever the role is, people understand the mission, they feel passionate about it. And no matter how busy it is, and it is very busy at this time of year, as you can imagine, these last few weeks as we wind down towards that IRS deadline, it kind of doesn't matter because the work that we're doing has great meaning. So like I said, it's a great privilege to be a part of that family.
Julie Sunwoo, president of DAF Giving 360. Julie, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great pleasure.
Julie has given us a lot to think about this holiday season. And as we wrap up, I wanted to highlight some additional resources available to you. In particular, there's a new article from the Schwab Center for Financial Research entitled Estate Planning: Lessons from a Loss. It touches on how you don't have to wait until after death to give to charity and strengthen your legacy. You can reap all the benefits we've mentioned in this episode by giving while you're still here. If you'd like to learn more about charitable giving, there are plenty of resources on schwab.com. As always, we'll provide links in the show notes. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can follow me on my LinkedIn page or at X at Mark Riepe. That's MarkRiepe. And we'd appreciate it if you gave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or comment on the show if you listen to it via Spotify. Or you can even tell a friend about it. We always like new listeners, so if you know someone who might like the show, please tell them about it and how they can follow us for free in their favorite podcasting app. Finally, this is the last episode of this season of Financial Decoder. I'll be back with brand new episodes in February. If you don't want to wait that long, check out the archives for previous episodes. There are plenty to choose from. Most of all, thanks for spending your valuable time with us, and have a great holiday season and a happy new year. For important disclosures, see the show notes and schwab.com/financial decoder.